We are Life Church Livonia.
Good morning, Life Church.
Good morning, Brian.
It is good to see you guys today. I'm so glad you chose to spend your Sunday with us. My name is Brian. I'm the pastor here, and I hope that each and every one of you has had a great kind of kickoff to the holiday season. Today is the first Sunday in Advent, and in the Christian calendar, what that means for us is that it's a season when we begin to kind of turn our eyes to the coming of Jesus. And we were talking about this morning, that the first couple of weeks is usually an opportunity for us to think about the reality of our eternal hope in Christ, that one day Jesus will come again, and that our hope is there. And the first couple of weeks of Advent are all about that, kind of long-term, looking out at the future. And the second two are all about remembering the first time he came as a baby in a manger. In humble situation and humble beginnings. And so I love that we just sang Baby Son, and we're going to start transitioning over into kind of the feel of Christmas. And for us, it's not too early because first of all, we waited till after Thanksgiving, right? That's the rule. But second of all, it's not too early because what Christmas is for us this season is a reminder that Jesus came. Jesus came, and that changed everything. And so we just want to invite you into that same spirit of expectantly waiting, hoping that Jesus would show up and do something beautiful in your life. And my hope is that would happen today as we kind of look closely at who he was. And so the question that I want to start with is this. What about Jesus? Was he an introvert or an extrovert? What do you think? Was Jesus an introvert or an extrovert? And I wanted to start off by saying I don't have a preference for either style. I tend to be the person who I lean a little bit more towards introversion, but I can be extroverted when I need to be. And so I'm always kind of there in the middle. I love people that are introverts and love to kind of get alone and spend time, be rejuvenated. But people that are extroverts, they need people. We need extroverts at church to make church fun, okay? We need you. But what about Jesus? Was he an introvert or an extrovert? And as I read scriptures, especially in the Gospels, my heart begins to hope that he was an extrovert. Because think about this. From the moment that he began ministry, he was always surrounded by people. Always. From the moment that he stepped out and began to engage and began calling disciples, people would follow him around everywhere he went. Getting alone time for Jesus was very difficult because there was always another person that was inviting him to eat in their homes, or to tell them a story, or to heal some disease, or answer some deep question, or challenge him in some way. There was always someone that wanted to engage him, and he was always surrounded by people all the time. And some of you feel this deeply because you just spent the entire week with family. And all of your normal rhythms and routines are messed up, and you're not able to escape the way you normally escape because you gave up your bedroom for someone, for Aunt Bob. Or Aunt Bob, that's odd. No judgment if you have an Aunt Bob, okay? I'm just saying. So listen, Jesus though, He gets it, this always being surrounded by people. Mark chapter 3 says this: Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan around Tyre and Sidon. So think about this for a moment. Jesus withdraws. Jesus retreats with the disciples to the lake, and what happened? People followed. The crowd followed him there. And these weren't just like people that he was close with, because some of us are thinking, well, I wouldn't mind going to the lake with my friends. That sounds really good, especially on a windy, cold day like today. But these weren't just his friends, right? These are random strangers that he had never met from all over, from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and all around the Jordan and Tyre and Sidon. So what you need to know is that people didn't travel like this back then. That you spent most of your life in a very small, localized area. You only traveled for holidays, for certain festivals. You traveled out of necessity. But people from all over the region are now gathering around Jesus, people that he didn't know, that the disciples had never met. They were probably like, who is this person and where did they come from? And they withdraw, and yet the crowd follows them. And in verse 9 it says, because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him. For he had healed many so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. The crowd was so insistent that Jesus had to tell his disciples to prepare an escape boat. Literally. He said, get a boat ready in case I need to go out on it and teach from it or lead from the boat so that people aren't pressing us into the water. And as I read this, I was thinking to myself, the boat probably wasn't for Jesus. It was actually probably for his disciples. Jesus didn't really need a boat. Did you know this? That's a story from another day. He says, get a boat ready because we might need to get out of here. They're pressing. They're pushing. They're insistent. And my germaphobes in the room will get this, that many of these people that were reaching and trying to touch him were diseased people. People with infirmities. People that had issues that they had been struggling with for years. People that no one else would touch. They were reaching out for Jesus because they had hope that his coming into the world would change something in their world. This was their reality. The crowds followed him everywhere, even when he needed to be alone. There's a moment in Matthew chapter 14 when Jesus has just gotten word that his cousin, John the Baptist, has been executed. I want you to put yourself in Jesus' shoes for a moment. This is, John the Baptist was the herald who announced that Jesus was coming. This was someone that he had known since he was a baby. And he was arrested because of his religious beliefs, his practices, what he was saying about Jesus and about what was happening and the need to repent and to change your life. He's arrested. He's falsely executed. He's beheaded at the whim of a woman at a party. I want you to imagine that one of your friends or family member is arrested by the government. That someone from the U.S. government shows up and arrests your family member and executes them because they follow Jesus. This is what happened to Jesus. He's just gotten word about John the Baptist. And in Matthew 14, it tells how he responded. It says this: when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So I would do that, wouldn't you? You've just got heartbreaking, crushing news, and Jesus says, I need a moment. He gets in a boat and he sails away privately to a solitary place. But listen to what it says. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. Now, I don't know about you. I would not take this well. Not at all, honestly. Your heart is broken. You're upset. You're angry because something unjust has just happened. And it's not just like a random injustice that you can look at from afar and feel aggravated or annoyed about, but not really be touched by it. It's something deep and hard and painful because it came really close to home. And if I withdrew in a moment like this and I made it clear, hey, I need to be alone, and people followed me, on a micro scale of this, it happens in many of our homes if you have children, right? You're like, Daddy needs a moment. And you go up and you try to close your bedroom door or whatever, and your kids are then knocking at the door, and you're like, did I not make it clear? I need a moment. This is Jesus, though. Here, he pulls away to a solitary place. And hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. How will Jesus respond in this crucial social interaction? It's really important that we see it. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. It doesn't say when Jesus landed, he was annoyed by them or frustrated by them. So I want you to picture this, that he takes off in a boat to go somewhere alone, and the crowd is so longing to be with him that they walk ahead and get to where he's going before he gets there. He didn't get any alone time besides the brief amount of time on the boat that it took to get to where he was going. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he didn't turn around and head the other direction or decide, skip this, I'm just going to stay in the middle of the lake, or I'm going to put my hood up on my cloak and pretend that I'm not Jesus, try to slip through their midst. It says he had compassion on them and healed their sick. And as evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place. And Jesus is like, I know, that's why I picked it. It's a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. And Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. They do not need to go away. Now, there's more to this story, and it's incredible what he does next. Is not only does he allow them to stay, but then he feeds them first. If you read further in the story, you'll see that eventually they are allowed to disperse. They do go home, but not before Jesus meets their needs. Not before he engages them in the space of their life that they needed to be engaged in. He says they do not need to go away. Sometimes we read the story and we hear the story of the feeding of the 5,000, which is what this is. And we get stuck on the feeding of the miracle, on the feeding of the 5,000, this beautiful moment of what Jesus did with the crowd. But we forget that it all started because Jesus was heartbroken and longed to be alone. And so even during one of the most difficult moments of his life, the loss of a close relative, a brother, really someone that he had grown up with, in the midst of an unjust execution, Jesus didn't seem to struggle with his social interactions. He didn't seem to struggle with it at all. And I don't think it has anything to do with whether or not he was an introvert or an extrovert. I don't think it has anything to do on what his personality was or his style of personality. It's not because he was somehow maybe an ultra extrovert that was okay with being around people. I think it has nothing to do with any of that, because Jesus modeled a way of engaging people that wasn't based on personality and it wasn't based on commonality. Jesus had a heart for people that transformed every social interaction of his life. He had a heart of compassion and love and care for people that transformed every interaction that he had with every person he ever met in every moment that we see in Scripture. Every single one. And as I read these words, I find myself longing to have a heart like his. I find myself longing to be more like Jesus. This is what it means to be a Christ follower, to long to be more like him. And especially for me, because social interactions have not always been very easy for me. For some reason, even from a young age, I can always remember struggling with certain social interactions. And as a younger kid, I just didn't know how to people, right? How do you people well? I don't know. I didn't know how. And we could dive into the psychology of that. I'm happy to talk to you about that later, about what happened and why I was the way I was. But some of you may have heard the story that I've told about my most awkward and my most glorious of all social failures. But if you haven't, I'd like to share that with you right now, just to show you how real this is, right? It was 7th grade. I was attending Broadmoor Junior High. And I wasn't really flourishing in the friend category, let's say. I didn't have a ton of close people. And like all of us, I'm longing for interactions, longing for friends, longing to be a part of a group of people. And so I decided I was going to take matters into my own hands. And I'm just going to pick a group out and try to engage that group. And so I chose a small group of friends that were at an appropriately low place on the social totem pole. Low fruit, okay? Low-hanging fruit here. And I decide I'm just going to engage them. And so they were all standing at a locker in the hallway. I can picture it right now. It tells you about this moment. And they're all standing there talking with the locker open, just engaging. I think it was before class. And so I walked up really boldly, and I just said, "Hi." And that was it. That's all I said. "Hi." And then I just stood there really awkwardly. They didn't say a single word. I'm just standing there thinking, this is the moment. I'm not sure what I thought was going to happen. I think I believed that they were going to miraculously enfold me in their little group, and we were going to be best friends, and we were going to hang out on the weekends together. And I probably had all these things in my head about what it was going to look like to be a part of this little social circle. But I don't know what I fully expected. But what happened in that moment probably requires a few more counseling sessions, because all they did was silently close the locker and walked away. Amber wants to give me a hug right now. They just walked away. It was like the social experience of synchronized swimming. That's what it looked like. It was like they had planned it ahead of time. They were going to all walk off at the same time. And it was really crushing. And for a kid who already struggled with how to people, then I thought, well, okay, never mind. It's just not worth it. I eventually chose to re-engage, and in high school, I figured out what I thought was the key to being cool, and I discovered that the key was confidence. And so I'm like, hey, if you can just be really confident, then you can be cool and people actually like you. So I went from being this really shy, reserved kid that had no idea how to people to an overly confident kid who still didn't know how to people but didn't care. I didn't care anymore. And so I went from being shy and genuine to really confident and proud and probably a little fake. Maybe on my worst days, really fake. And neither of those versions of me is the best version of me. Neither of those versions of me are the version of me that Jesus wants me to become as I learn more and more about what it means to follow him. And as I got older, as you begin to dive into who you are personality-wise, I went deep. I went into all the different personality inventories. I've taken the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and the Strength Finder and a few personality inventories I don't even remember the name of. One in particular, I don't remember the name, but it told me what animal I was like. I don't know if maybe someone can tell me later what that was. I've taken at least 6 Enneagram tests and gone to workshops and classes and learned a ton about myself. I have an entire binder at home filled with all of these tests that tell me about who I am. And honestly, it's helped in a lot of ways that there's places in my life that I was blind to prior to this outside kind of feedback that have helped me deeply in all different areas of my life and my relationships. But none of those classes or workshops or inventories or any of the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs or the DISC, none of it has affected my ability to people more than one simple thing. One simple thing has changed more about how I engage people than anything else, and it's this: discovering the heart of Jesus for me. Discovering Jesus' heart for me, and then allowing my heart to be changed to look more like his. This is it, friends. This is the critical piece of the puzzle that I think all of us need. And the first part is so critical, discovering the heart of Jesus for us. To realize that the same Jesus that had time for those people that needed healing, those people that reached out to him and were so insistent that they had to get a boat to escape, that same Jesus that had time for those people to give them healing has time for me. And that same Jesus who engaged the crowds even when he could have escaped, even when he could have just turned the boat around and gone the other direction, that same Jesus who engaged them is willing to engage me. That the same Jesus who took the time to love on every single person that he engaged, even the ones that no one else would engage with, even the ones that no one else would touch, the same Jesus that chose to love on them chooses to love on me, and it changes things. It changes me. It changes my heart. And as I discover my heart, his heart for me, it changes my heart for people. Because as my heart changes, my motivation changes. What is driving me to engage people changes. The reason I do what I do changes because I begin to learn how to people according to the way of Jesus. I want you to think about this. Jesus is changing my motivation for engaging people, and I believe that he can change yours as well. I say is changing because this is not a momentary experience. This is not you make a decision today to do things the way Jesus would have you do them and suddenly you're perfect at it. I say Jesus is changing my motivation because sometimes for us, it's a daily reminder to go to Jesus, to see his heart for us, and then allow his heart for us to change our heart for people. It's not that personality doesn't matter or that every person will engage socially in the same exact way. I hope not. There's a beauty in the diversity that we experience here at church. There's a beauty in the way that we engage. It's that personality doesn't matter as much as having our motivations shaped and molded by God. It's that personality or preferences don't matter as much as allowing God to give us his heart for people. I long for us to engage people God's way. I long for us to step past the innate longing that each of us have to be liked, to be seen, to be recognized, to be valued, sometimes to be left alone. I long for us to step past all of the things in our life that prevent us from engaging people in God's way. I long for us to step past that into a space where God can use us to express his love and grace and mercy and encouragement and care to all of the people around us. To step past the momentary hardships in our life to engage people. I long for us to be like Jesus because that's my longing for me. And I also hope that for you as well. Sometimes we try, but we get distracted. Have you ever been there where you make a decision? I'm going to do this. And then you get distracted by something that's going on either internally or externally. Something that's happening inside your own heart or head or something that's happening in the world around you. I love the story of Mary and Martha in the Gospel of Luke for lots of reasons. But one of them is that it's a story that reveals Jesus' heart for social interactions. I'm going to read some of that story to you right now. It's from Luke chapter 10. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. I love the beginning of this because Martha in this story often gets a bad rap. She often, if you know the story well, you know that many times we talk about how Martha screws everything up here, but she did something really right at the beginning. Jesus and his disciples walking into this small village. They weren't from there. There was no McDonald's drive-through to go through. Wasn't probably a hotel to stay in. They wouldn't have had the money probably anyway. They come walking into town and Martha notices them. She sees them. And she doesn't think, oh, I hope they have a place to stay or a place to eat. She says, hey, I have a place where they could stay. I have a place where they could eat. And she opens her home to Jesus and his disciples. She practices a beautiful moment of hospitality. She lets them into her home. And as you know, letting someone into your home is an intensely personal thing, isn't it? It's an intensely personal thing. And because when someone comes into your home, they get to see how you do life. Or at least the curated version that you present to them of how you do life. And for some of us, the version that we show people that are guests in our home looks nothing like real life in our home. It's far cleaner in our home. It's far more ordered. It's far more scheduled. It's less messy. There's no arguments until everyone leaves. But letting someone into your home on a regular basis means that they're going to eventually see how you do life. They're going to see the real you. And this beautiful thing that Martha does is she opens her home to Jesus and she says, come in. What's mine is yours. I want to welcome you. She practices this beautiful and biblical expression of hospitality for Jesus and his friends. This is supposed to be one of the hallmarks of what it means to be a Christian. To be a person that's willing to open up your home and to share it, to practice hospitality. And Martha did it. She noticed this dusty, travel-weary group of guys. I bet you it smelled great in her living room. And she welcomes them in. But the story goes on. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. We don't know what motivated her to be hospitable. Maybe it was she had good motives. Maybe she had not so good motives. Maybe her motive was just that she wanted to love on them. Maybe it was because she wanted to be noticed. I don't know what her motivations were to open her home in the first place, but it's pretty easy to guess what motivated her to this place of distraction. It's pretty easy to figure out what motivated her frantic preparations. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that she wanted to prove that she was worthy of the attention that Jesus was giving her. By showing him the quality of her cooking, the cleanliness of her home, the hard work that she was willing to put into making his stay perfect. Probably the reason she got so distracted was that she wanted to be the perfect hostess. To make everything just the way it should be. Maybe she was an introvert, I don't know. Maybe she felt more comfortable cooking and cleaning than she felt actually sitting down and having a conversation. Maybe it was easier for her to prepare than it was to engage. But her sister didn't even seem to consider any of those things. Mary just sat at the feet of Jesus, listening, engaging. The whole time that Martha is running around the house, Mary is just hanging out with Jesus. So Martha gets frustrated. And she came to him, meaning Jesus, and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. But few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Martha was so distracted by all these things that didn't matter to Jesus. She was doing all this work for Jesus. But all the things that she was doing for Jesus didn't truly matter to Jesus. She didn't have to prove her worth to him. She didn't have to rush and hurry to impress him. She was missing out on an opportunity to simply be with Jesus because of the expectations that she placed on herself, not based on the expectations that Jesus placed on her. These were all expectations that she placed on herself. And as I read this text, I ask myself the question, how often do we stumble into the same type of behavior with our social interactions? Where we rush around getting distracted by things that probably don't matter in the long run. Whether they're internal distractions or external distractions, I don't know what they are, but I think that a lot of times in our social interactions, we are trying desperately to live up to expectations that other people never placed on us. Expectations that we only place on ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't relationships that you have where people place expectations on you. It happens. It happens within marriages. It happens within parenting relationships. It happens with in-laws. There are going to be situations where people place expectations on you that you shouldn't carry, that aren't yours to carry. And so whether it's a distraction of an expectation that someone else has placed on you or a distraction that you've placed on yourself, how often do we do this where we get distracted from the best thing, the one thing? We get distracted by trying to impress all the people that come over because we don't want them to see how messy our life really is or how messy our kitchen really is. Worried and upset about many things, but all the while missing the best thing. This was Martha. And Jesus says, Mary chose better. What Mary has chosen is the right thing, the best thing. And so the question is, what did she choose? And why was it better? Mary chose to elevate presence over preparation. Presence over preparation. It's not that preparing for a meal or cleaning the house isn't important. I'm not suggesting that we should never cook and we should never clean. What I'm saying is that in a moment when you have an opportunity to either be fully present or to do more preparations, Jesus is saying choosing to be present is way more important. Choosing to be present is the best thing. Mary chose to engage in conversation, hearing their stories, listening to them tell the tale of the time when Jesus was getting pressed up against at the lake and all these people were coming to be healed, and he could have walked away in the water, and yet he reached out and touched people, and as he did, all the things that were troubling them melted away. Jesus, tell me that story again about the time when you tried to escape and get away and be by yourself, but then all those people followed you and there wasn't enough food. And so you took a few loaves and some bread and some fishes and you divided it and multiplied it and it became enough for thousands. Tell me that story again. She sat and she was present with Jesus. I think Mary chose to be the real her, without having to prove that she was worthy of that time, worthy of that attention. She just wanted to be with Jesus. I don't know what her motivations were, but if I had to guess, I would say that Mary was motivated by a desire to discover the heart of Jesus. And I'm certain that she was changed by what she discovered. I'm certain of it. This is the heart of the story. And this is an invitation to choose a better way, to choose the one thing, the needful thing, especially in this holiday season. Some of you have spent a ton of time with people over the last week, and you're done. You're ready to be done. But then you realize Christmas is coming. And instead of it creating this hopeful, expectant Advent in your heart, it creates a fear and a worry and a frustration because you know you're going to have to people more. And I'm wondering, deep inside, is what if we responded to the invitation of Jesus to do as Mary has done? To sit at his feet and discover his heart for you. To sit at the feet of Jesus and discover his heart for us. To allow him to see us and engage us. What would it look like for us to not only sit at his feet, but invite him to change our hearts towards people? To allow Jesus to change our motivation, the very reason why we engage people in the first place. What if we invited Jesus to transform the way we view people? This is an invitation to learn how to people in a brand new way. Because our reasons for engaging people are what set us apart from the world. As a follower of Jesus, that the way that I engage and the reason why I engage people, and I want it to be really clear, I am not perfect at this. And I'm still, by nature, more introverted. And social interactions can still be difficult for me, but ultimately, the reason I engage people is because I want to have the heart of Jesus. Because people matter to God, and because they matter to God, they should matter to me. In one of Jesus' stories, later in his ministry, he tells a story about caring for people. And he says in the midst of that story, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. And I've often thought about that when I engage people, that I think this, what if this was Jesus? How would I treat them? What if she was Jesus? Would I stop? What if he was Jesus? Would I engage? Would I walk across the room? Would I introduce myself? Would I offer help? And there's been seasons in my life where I engaged that from really kind of a I had to motivation. Like I'm going to get judged by Jesus if I don't do this. It's duty. It's my duty to walk across the room and engage that person. But what happens the longer you sit at the feet of Jesus is you realize that it's not just about duty. It is our Christian responsibility to do that. But it's more about allowing Jesus to change our heart for those people. Why would Jesus walk across the room and engage them? Because he loves them. Why would he walk across the room and talk to that person? Because he cares about them. He sees them and he values them, all of their intrinsic worth. What if we learned how to people from Jesus? How would it change the lobby of our church? On Sundays, this is our house. It's the house of God, and we live here. What if you got it into your head that every Sunday, if you're a regular attender here, that you are the host? You are the hostess. That every person that walks in the door is your treasured, honored, valuable guest. How would it change your interactions on a Sunday? I want to give you 4 simple things. There's a card in your bulletin. It says how to people. It's really simple. There's 4 simple suggestions on here about things you can do that I think really capture part of the heart of Jesus. And the first is this: be hospitable. Be hospitable. This is the Martha decision, to choose a heart towards people, towards others that says, you are welcome here with me. To just realize this is what it means to welcome people into our home every Sunday, to welcome people into your home, to welcome people into your life, to choose a heart of Martha, to be hospitable. And 2, just be curious. Be curious. And this is an opportunity to choose to be interested in someone else's world, not to be fixated on or to be afraid of how they might judge your world. This is Mary, sitting at the feet of Jesus, just really curious about who this guy was. Who are these men that have given up their lives to follow them? What are the stories I've been hearing? Are they true? She was curious. Put this in the context of a first date. We joke about terrible first dates are when you go out and you're sitting at dinner together, whatever you're doing, and the other person only wants to talk about themselves and doesn't seem to be interested in you at all. How would that interaction change if that individual is simply curious about you? How would that interaction change in the lobby of church if someone was genuinely interested in you? It makes you feel good. Let's engage people in a way that makes them feel good. Number 3, be you. Be yourself. No one likes everyone and no one needs fake friends. Raise your hand if you need fake friends. No one. Be you. Is there a you that is the you at home when you feel completely free? Like maybe for me, it's the super goofy me. I am really weird, friends, okay? In fact, at my house, we have competitions to see who's the weirdest, and usually I win. That's me. That's goofy me. And so as we step into relationships socially, the invitation to you is just to be you. This is your home. Be you. Be appropriate. I see you out there. Be you. No one likes fake people. No one wants fake friends. And finally, be free. Be free to graciously end conversations when you're ready. Talking to someone doesn't mean you have to be trapped by someone. And there's something that we need to look at. The opposite side of this is allow people to be free. Don't trap people. Don't trap people. Even Jesus eventually sent the people away. He would meet them where they were, engage them in their needs, and then graciously end the interaction and send them home. Even after he fed them, the 5,000, he eventually sent them home. Be free. It starts with a heart of hospitality. It moves into an attitude of being curious about someone. It's an invitation to be the real you, and finally, just to be free. Be free. What would happen if we learned how to people from Jesus? If we sat at his feet like Mary. And we allowed him to express his heart towards us and then allowed him to change our hearts towards them. I think it would change your daily interactions and it would change our reactions here at church. Today we have an opportunity to celebrate communion. And as we do, one of the beautiful things about this table is it's representative of Jesus' heart for hospitality. I want you to think back towards the beginning when the first communion, when Jesus and his disciples just gathered to hang out together. They gathered around a meal, laughing and telling stories and joking, talking about serious things, eating together, doing life together. They didn't have a home they could do it in because they were traveling so much, so they rented a room, they rented a space, but they made that space their own. This is the heart of Jesus for us, for you. And today as we worship through communion, we remember Jesus' words that day. We remember that on the night that he was betrayed by one of those friends, he knew they were going to betray him and he still engaged socially with that person. He took bread and after blessing it, he broke it. He said, "This is my body broken for you." And in the same way, after supper, he took the cup and he said, "This cup, it represents my blood that's about to be shed for you. And it represents a new covenant, a new promise between myself and you." He says, "I'm going to be in a relationship with you, changing, transforming you all the way up until the time that I come again. As often as you eat the bread and you drink the cup, you do this in remembrance of me." What if we did everything in remembrance of him? What if we peopled in remembrance of him? If you follow Jesus, if you call yourself a Christian, this table is for you. I'm going to invite Sarah to come and help me serve. And come not because you must, come because you may. Come not because you feel it's your duty, come because you are invited. Come because this table is an invitation into deeper relationship with God and with people. The crackers are gluten-free. The juice is for everyone. You can come down the middle and come to either station and take your time and go back to your chairs. Come because you want to meet with Jesus today. Can we pray? Jesus, we worship you in this place. And if there's any in our midst today, God, who've never sat at your feet and seen your heart for them, I ask that you would invite them to that space right now. If that's you, just in your own heart and the quiet of your own mind, just invite you to ask Jesus a question. How do you see me, Jesus? What's your heart for me? And his response to you is he loves you. He sees you, the real you, and he welcomes you into relationship with him. He says, leave your troubles behind, leave your struggles behind, leave your sins behind. I forgive you for all of that. Come and sit with me. Let's share a meal. We welcome you, Jesus, into our homes, into our hearts, into our lives, and we thank you for inviting us into yours. Commit this time to you in your name.